We may be inching closer to a shutdown, but my next guest says the markets will remain largely unaffected, even as proposals show no sign of helping to close that soaring budget deficit. Joining me now is Ed Mills, Washington policy analyst at Raymond James. Ed, it's good to see you. Welcome.
Thanks, Kelly.
So I think it's interesting that, if anything, we're looking at the biggest impact on the rates market, and that itself is kind of moving the stock market, but you still don't think there's going to be a huge effect?
Yeah, Kelly. So what we did at Raymond James is looked at all of the shutdowns since 1995 and said, what did the market do? Because we hear a lot from clients, is this a real concern? And what we found was very counterintuitive. Since 1995, when the government shut down, the market's gone up. There's a little bit of a fear trade sometimes in the treasury markets, but I don't think that this is something that investors really need to fear. And actually, 30 days after the shutdown, universally, the market has been up since 1995.
I'm just not, I think what's different this time, and it's not that we all know the economic impact of a shutdown is de minimis, but it does feel like the fiscal picture is very different this time. Even though we've had interest rates at these levels before, it was never with kind of deficit and debts as high as they are. And so I'm just not sure how comparable. In other words, if we said, forget about the shutdown, but what do we do about the fiscal picture? What should be done, right? The 10 years over 4.5% today. What would you say?
Yeah, Kelly, I think you kind of are hitting on exactly what Jay Powell said last week, which there's a very long list out there. And I do think that those need to be concerns. I think we look at the right track, wrong track of the country, and people are not very optimistic. And is that going to lead to changes in consumer sentiment? Is that going to lead to changes in consumer behavior, which does have a market implication? I know that there's a lot of conversation about student loans. That is a potential headwind here, but beneath the surface, there's so many changes to the way in which we'll pay student loans that the resumption is a lot less than what I think people think. So absolutely tons of headwinds here, Kelly. I just think that they're less than what people want to tell the story they actually are.
So what is the fight in Washington over? Is it over spending levels? We know that the deficit this year was much higher than expected, about $2 trillion. It looks like we're closing out double what we had last year. What's it expected to be for the next 12 months?
Yeah, it's only going higher at this point. When we look back to the debt limit deal, that didn't actually cut funding. That actually reduced the increase in funding. In the background, you have the Inflation Reduction Act, you have the CHIPS and Science Act, you have the bipartisan infrastructure bill, all adding to the fiscal support that's out there. Most of that money hasn't even started to go out the door. We have a 10-year runway on most of that still to come. The fight that you ask about really is within the House Freedom Caucus. There's a group that are not happy at the direction in which Speaker McCarthy is leading his caucus,
right,
and they want to have the fight. The problem there is they don't have a specific ask. They know that they might want to shut down the government, but they don't know what's next.
So that would be my question for, as we follow this along. And dissatisfaction with the speaker, interpolitical things, they're mildly interesting, not hugely so, but is there going to be a specific fight over a specific amount of spending, or over, are we at that stage of this yet? Is that really a factor here or not?
Not really. I mean, I think the fight that we're talking about are pennies. When you talk about the other things that we highlighted, those are massive multi-hundred of billions or trillions of dollars that are out there. So I don't think that comes. And what I'm really focused on here, Kelly, is that all the attention has been on the House, but really the action, I think, is going to originate in the Senate. If the Senate is able to pass a continuing resolution that keeps the government open, my expectation that could get 75, 80 votes. And then it's only a matter of time before the House has to consider that. That would probably have more than 300 votes. So even if we have a shutdown, it would be short-lived.